to one and all present here. It is an absolute honor to welcome you all to a guest lecture session on the topic Tourism and Equality in a post-COVID-19 world, role of industry practitioners, that is being organized by Amity Institute of Travel and Tourism, Amity University, Kolkata. Now may I request Professor Siddharth Nanda sir, the head of the institute, to kindly introduce our esteemed guest for the day.
Thank you, Professor Vandita. It is an immense pleasure to welcome Dr. Kalisch. She is an expert on fairly traded and ethical tourism and the founder of Ananta Ethical Tourism, Chair of Equality in Tourism International, and an associate lecturer in Tourism and Business Management at the University of Gloucestershire in Southwest England. Dr. Angela's career spans a wide field of sectors including education, economic development for equal opportunities, and a substantial career in tourism. This includes running her own trekking business in the Himalayas, developing international fair trade in tourism policy, and teaching sustainable tourism to the next generation of tourism managers. She is a highly skilled professional with extensive experience of leading international research projects, multi-stakeholder consultation, developing innovative policy and practice through active participatory engagement. She is a qualified Prince 2 project manager for sustainable development and a multilingual bilingual in German, English, and French. As a chair of Equality in Tourism, which works to create change for women in tourism and hospitality, and a trustee of the Andy Fanchua Memorial Trust, promoting disadvantaged young people in outdoor adventure activities. She has a close connection with India as she has spent a lot of time as adventure tour travel operator as well, and also has conducted a lot of research on it. Now, I would request ma'am to please proceed with the session, and it's an honor to have you with us today. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you so much for that glowing introduction. Good afternoon in Kolkata. Namaskar. I'm grateful and honored to be invited by the Amity Institute of Travel and Tourism to share this guest lecture with you today on tourism and equality in a post-COVID-19 world, focusing on the role of industry practitioners. So as you have heard, I have my own ethical tourism consultancy, Ananta, and I'm also the chair and trustee of Equality in Tourism, a UK-based non-profit organization. And I would like now to share my slides with you to make sure that you can see, and I hope you can see the slides.
Yes, ma'am, the slides are visible.
Sorry?
The slide is visible.
Good. Okay, here we are. Thank you so much. So if you look at the Equality in Tourism website, you will see something like this. Our vision, for example, we work on the transformation of gender relations in destinations and tourism organizations to achieve sustainable and equitable tourism. We believe that gender equality is inherently necessary for realizing sustainable tourism. And we do this through cutting-edge research, collaborative and applied research, steeped in practice, informed by practice, and thought leadership on gender equality in tourism and hospitality, leading to increased structural change in the industry. And I mean structural change in gender relations in the industry. And our strategies include the promotion of equal representation for women. We are linking with the industry to do that, access to opportunities, influence and control over decision-making throughout the tourism industry. And we are trying to align this work with the Sustainable Development Goals developed by the United Nations in 2015 and promoting a human rights approach to tourism business and development. So one of the projects, for example, that we have developed is called Wamboma, and it's based in Tanzania in the Kilimanjaro region. It's a women's farming cooperative, which started off as a women's empowerment project with training on legal rights and business development and cooperative development. And the idea has been to link up with the hotels, the hospitality industry in Tanzania, to provide hotels with the produce that they have been growing on their fields and make a business out of it to increase their incomes and livelihoods, which has been a terrific project to increase livelihood opportunities for the women. But of course, now with COVID, there are no tourists, and so they're redirecting their produce for local markets in a very innovative kind of way. And we've just had a big donation campaign to make sure that they can be funded to do so. Now, my presentation today is the backdrop of 4 key United Nations sources of relevant knowledge that every tourism practitioner and policymaker should be aware of. And I'm sure you have heard of these as well, and maybe studied them even. So there's the human rights legislation and the guiding principles on business and human rights. The Sustainable Development Goals, which are 17 goals, including decent work and economic growth and climate action, and goal number 5, which deals with gender equality. Then there's the 2019 United Nations World Tourism Organization Global Report on Women in Tourism, and the United Nations Women Knowledge Base on the gendered impact of COVID. So any good presentation should probably start with a definition. And so if we look at the definition of equality, equality is the same status, rights, and responsibilities for all the members of a society, group, or family. Now, in the UK, we have an Equality and Human Rights Commission. This commission oversees the implementation of the Equality Act in 2010, which incorporates all the relevant equality and anti-discrimination legislation, such as the Equal Pay Act, which was started in 1970, Sex Discrimination Act, Race Relations Act, all from the 1970s, Disability Discrimination Act, and Employment Equality Acts, and more. So in the UK, employers have a legal obligation not to discriminate, which means that if there is unequal representation of women, who represent, after all, 50% of the population, employers are actually in contravention of the law. But of course, discrimination is hard to prove. But their definition, as you can see, says no one should have poorer life chances because of the way they were born, where they come from, what they believe, or whether they have a disability. Equality recognizes that historically certain groups of people with protected characteristics, such as race, disability, sex, and sexual orientation, have experienced discrimination. Now, equality is firmly entrenched in the 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which gave rise to the 4th World Conference on Women in September 1995 in Beijing. The outcome of this was the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, the most progressive blueprint ever for advancing women's rights. It enshrines human rights of women and of the girl child as an inalienable, integral, and indivisible part of all human rights and fundamental freedoms. The importance of interpretation of human rights through a gender lens, and the focus on gender equality as being crucial to sustainable development. However, whilst there is a high level of equality between women and men on paper and in law, in reality, the persistence of discriminatory social norms and practices still lead to gross gender inequalities. Before I continue, I would like to ask you 3 questions to ponder. We can come back to these in the Q&A session at the end, or you can discuss these with your tutors after the session in your lectures, or else you can put your answers or comments into the chat function. So first of all, a case study on Uganda. In February 2019, the tourism minister of Uganda angered many Ugandan women when he announced at a press conference his plan to launch a new tourism campaign featuring curvy and sexy women in the official literature for the nation's tourism. Its centerpiece was to be a beauty pageant to find Miss Curvy Uganda, the winner of which would be used in the advertising campaign. The question is, why do you think the women were angered? In November 2020, a group of 15 women bikers rode off from Bhopal, which you might be aware of, in India, on a 1,500-kilometer trail around the state of Madhya Pradesh to advertise tourism offers during the COVID-19 pandemic, in a campaign asserting that Madhya Pradesh was safe to visit, in particular for solo women travelers. And my question is, do you think this represents equality? And the last one is a quote from an online source called The Diplomat in the context of a Thailand advertising campaign in 2016. Through female objectification, women are brought into the public sphere, but only in ways that do not change patriarchal systems of power. Their visibility is unmatched when selling the nation, but their voices are unheard when deciding where the nation goes. And the question is, what do you think this means, and how does it relate to your experience? Can I just check that you can all hear me and you can see the slides? Because I can't see my camera now.
See the slides, and also we can hear your voice very clearly.
Very good. Thank you very much. That's reassuring. Thank you. So, what is gender equality? Well, we're talking about it in a way which assumes that there is inequality. Excuse me. So, Stroma Cole, in her book in 2018 on gender equality in tourism and beyond empowerment, quotes, "Gender is a system of cultural identities and social relationships between females and males, characterized by unequal power and norms that determine an unequal distribution of resources, work, decision-making, political power, and the entitlement of rights and obligations in both the public and private spheres. A system that engenders gender inequalities is a system called patriarchy, where men hold the primary power in all sections of society, assigning a status of inferiority and dependence to women. And I believe currently, just as we are in a climate change emergency, we are also facing a gender equality emergency. And I'm going on to explain why. Now, whilst equality legislation in many countries has been designed to address discrimination and abuse of patriarchal power, the majority of women worldwide have by far not achieved full equality. It is therefore also crucial for women to assume power for themselves, to challenge a system fraught with structural gender inequalities. Women's empowerment is thus seen as a major concept within development and politics to transform power relations in favor of women's rights and equality between women and men. And at Equality in Tourism, we believe that the key facets of empowerment are agency, i.e. the capacity to initiate action, autonomy, the ability to decide for oneself, and authority to be respected and looked up to. Now, women are often classed as vulnerable. However, they're only vulnerable because of discrimination. If we didn't have gender inequality, they wouldn't be vulnerable, not needing protection. And there's a fine line between protection and patronizing women. Now, unfortunately, gender equality globally and in tourism and hospitality has been moving at a snail's pace. The 2018 World Economic Forum report on the global gender gap estimates that the overall global gender gap will close in 108 years across 106 countries covered in their survey. Apparently, the most challenging gender gaps to close are the economic and political empowerment dimensions, which will take about 202 and 107 years to close, respectively. So we're a long way away from equality. And I don't know about you, but I don't have that much time to wait. Such inequalities are starkly reflected in the tourism and hospitality industry. Although in some sectors of the industry, important advances have been made. Excuse me. The Equality in Tourism Report on Women in Tourism and Hospitality Boardrooms 2018 cites several good practice case studies as prime examples for transforming gender imbalances successfully, such as global adventure travel company Intrepid Travel, which has achieved parity on their global leadership team, doubled female guides, and introduced unconscious bias training for all staff. Or the Radisson Hotel Group, for example, which has embraced gender equality in senior positions as part of their diversity and inclusions policy. However, on the whole, progress in the tourism and hospitality industry is limited and too slow. The above-mentioned Equality in Tourism report shows that in the 5 years between its first report in 2018 and the update in 2018, a sample of 17 major global tour operators increased representation of women on their company boards by just 1%, from 19 to 20%. And airlines and cruise lines are not faring much better. And further research by Equality in Tourism in 2019 reveals that only 9 out of 40 tour operators and 15 out of 34 hotel companies researched have gender equality and diversity policies visible on their websites. And I just want to show you the graph taken from the report, which shows you the huge difference between men and women in 2013 and 2018. The purple colors is women in 2018, the green is in 2013, and the rest is men. And you can see the huge discrepancy between men and women on company boards at that particular time. And now with COVID, I'm not sure that it has much improved. So we can see TUI here, for example, vast difference, Panorama tour operator, huge difference, increased men and only slightly women, and there are hardly any increases in some of the others. Now, for women, it's an obstacle course in employment and in society. The majority of women working in the global tourism and hospitality sector are concentrated in low-paid, low-skilled, often back-breaking jobs, reflecting the position accorded to them by social convention, such as cleaning, housekeeping, catering, and customer service. Many are migrants and in insecure jobs. Escaping from these into a rewarding career can be an insurmountable challenge. Gender roles are deeply embedded within people's consciousness and accepted unquestioningly, often by both men and women. This results in discrimination, influences recruitment and selection and career progression, and in particular also sexual harassment. And I'd like to go into more detail what happens at the workplace. So for example, firstly, we have a pay gap. There is still a big gender pay gap, between 8 and 20% between men and women. The fewer women in top positions, the wider the pay gap. In the UK from 2017, reporting on the pay gap has become mandatory for companies with more than 250 staff. In tourism, the international travel company TUI reports the largest gender pay gap of any large UK company. Male employees are paid more than double the female staff, and women's bonus pay in 2017 was nearly 70% lower than men's. This is partly also due to the lack of female pilots on the airline, and the same is true for other airlines as well. Reporting on the pay gap has been suspended during COVID-19 and needs to be reinstated as a matter of urgency. Many companies are governed by a masculine culture. invisible rules and beliefs among groups of people defined by their working environment, which are still largely based on male perception of success, competition, leadership style, and behavior. Women primarily are seen as carers. In tourism and hospitality, staff are required to work unsociable hours. They need to travel extensively across multi-site operations. Managers have expected to travel both nationally and internationally. As a problem needing maternity leave or carer leave, there is limited or no childcare available for both parents at work. Only when men have caring duties, the invisibility of childcare comes actually to light. Globally, there are estimates that women's contribution to all types of care contributes about $11 trillion or 9% to the GDP. And so this is unpaid, invisible care, which could actually also benefit the economy if women were able to take part actively in the economy. And unpaid carers in the UK provide social care worth £57 billion. So this means that there is a lack of power and influence, and due to the lack of women in senior and executive roles, women are unable to shape policy and strategic decisions in companies. Now, sexual harassment is a major problem throughout any industry, but also in tourism and hospitality. A study by the UK trade union Unite in 2018 found that 9 out of 10 workers in bars, restaurants, hotels experienced sexual harassment and other forms of abuse. Now, in destination communities, what happens is, as I mentioned before, in the case study, objectification of women in marketing and promotion, for example. Women are seen as exotic sex objects. They're used in beauty pageants or in advertising for marketing campaigns. We have zooification, which means that women are perceived as cultural harborers of tradition. So indigenous and tribal women, like the Kayang in Thailand, are often paraded like museum objects for the benefit of tourists. You may remember the outcry of the exploitation of the Jarava tribe in the Andaman Islands a few years ago, where young girls were forced to dance for the tourists in exchange for their food. In some cultures, the tourism industry is often not regarded as reputable occupation for a woman. Such constraints can restrict her freedom of choice for a career, income, and independence, which could be leading to a certain degree of empowerment. Working in tourism often leads to stigmatization and decreased status on the marriage market. Around 800,000 women and children are trafficked each year across international borders. This is a gross violation of human rights. 80% of trafficked persons end in forced sex work. The travel and tourism industry is impacted daily as traffickers transport victims on aeroplanes, taxis, trains, and buses, even more so during major sporting events, conventions, and at vacation destinations. Hotels may unknowingly, or sometimes knowingly, sell rooms to sex traffickers for exploitation, or may hire labor-trafficked individuals to work in their operations. If this paints a sorry picture of gender equality, COVID-19 has been making things even worse. Online recruitment, grooming, and exploitation have been widely used by traffickers during the pandemic. The majority of anti-trafficking stakeholders and survivors of trafficking reported decreased accessibility of assistance and services for victims of trafficking and survivors of trafficking. So what's happening now during COVID? Well, you will have experienced this very, very acutely, like anybody in the world. Although the tourism industry has contributed to the spread of COVID to a certain extent, it's also now the biggest loser. As a result of COVID-19, by April 2020, The near universal introduction of travel restrictions around the globe led to a fall of 97% in international tourist arrivals. And current trends point to a decline in international arrivals close to 70%. And I'm showing you this graph here to show the increase of tourism, which has only been interrupted by a couple of dips during the recession and the SARS, or the World Trade disaster as well. And here you can see the decrease of almost 1 billion tourists due to COVID, which is a major decrease. The impact of the pandemic could translate into a drop of 850 million to 1.1 billion international tourists, and a loss of 910 billion to $1.2 trillion in export revenues from tourism, putting 100 to 120 million direct jobs from tourism at risk. And this shows globally the impact on the different continents. So you can see that the Asia and the Pacific region has been really hard hit, and this was only between January and May 2020, and this is likely to have increased now, a decrease of 60%. And Europe isn't far behind with 58%, and the rest of the world follows not far behind. So this is a major event. The region that is supposed to see the biggest loss is the Asia-Pacific region, which has also been the fastest growing in the past. Now, unemployment is going to, as I said before, hit between 100 and 120 million jobs which are at risk in tourism. Now, for those who are still working, and there are still some hotels open, for example, and some nations are trying to resume tourism gradually, but there is now increased workloads and the risk of infection for for women, for those that are working, particularly in customer service. Women in tourism and particular hospitality are found in, as I said before, stereotypically assigned jobs such as cleaning and housekeeping and so on. And if tourism is resuming, housekeepers, for example, in hotels and other staff, who are mostly women, are exposed to increased workload on cleaning schedules and risk of infection. And there is a risk that due to financial pressures, they may be forced to work even though they are unwell, or their employers might force them to work in circumstances which could be risky. Yet when it comes to senior management and policy making, women are generally underrepresented or absent from key decision-making bodies. Tourism and hospitality companies need to make sure that women from all employment areas are consulted and included in relevant decision-making bodies, particularly those most at risk of infection, such as customer service staff and housekeepers. Collaboration with relevant trade unions and industry associations should be sought for advice and implementation of safe and COVID-secure environments and working practices. The tourism sector consists mostly of micro and small and medium enterprises. Many are family businesses, and they're often not registered. And they're either run by women or co-managed, whilst they're also taking care of domestic duties and unpaid care work. This has now increased due to the children at home and homeschooling and caring for elderly or sick relatives. Most of these businesses will find it hard to survive. Women in the informal economy in some countries represent 90%. In India, it's 94%. They're not protected by government support. In tourism, this would be street and beach vendors, handicraft producers, mostly supplementing household income. These jobs are particularly at risk during the pandemic. And COVID has many forced back into their homes, into unpaid care work, sometimes gender-based violence and domestic abuse, and often backbreaking traditional work, such as agricultural work or fishing. Any progress that has been made to encourage greater equality for women in the workforce will have been lost during COVID, as women carry the main burden for childcare and other care responsibilities. For many, teleworking from home will either not be an option or extremely stressful. Women were already carrying at least 3 times the domestic workload of men before the COVID outbreak emerged in early March. And it's worse for single, the majority of whom are women. And now during COVID, worryingly more women than men are leaving the workforce, perhaps as a result of these increased workloads. This also includes women in senior and executive positions. As a result, many are also suffering from mental health issues and burnout, worrying about redundancies and financial security. Telecommunication and technology will be a growth industry and will be a key sector for job creation, especially in tourism and hospitality. However, women are vastly underrepresented in that sector. Only 22% of artificial intelligence professionals globally are female. And job displacement through automation will be a serious issue in future. Around 180 million female jobs are at high risk of being displaced globally. The COVID crisis will accelerate the development of artificial intelligence in most sectors, which is human resources. This is particularly a case within tourism and hospitality, where automation has already started, replacing human beings through robots and apps. An analysis by the Brookings Institution in Washington estimates that within accommodation and food services, there is a 73% potential for automation. These are also the sectors with a predominantly female workforce. With little revenue coming in, firms, especially women-owned ones, are struggling with limited access to credit. Globally, 80% of women-owned businesses with credit needs are either unserved or underserved. In the COVID environment, banks may become even more risk-averse and decrease loans to women further. So, what is the role of industry practitioners in promoting gender equality in tourism post-COVID? What will the tourism world look like for gender equality post-COVID? Well, currently the industry obviously has been decimated. Apart from the biggest corporations and possibly those without debt, thousands of businesses will have either collapsed or stagnated. In my estimation, it will take at least another 2 years before we can see a gradual recovery from tourism, particularly international tourism. Regional and domestic tourism will recover more quickly, particularly in India, where this kind of tourism outweighs international tourism. However, whether suppliers are ready to meet the demand is another question. Whilst there are hopeful signs that a vaccine will eventually halt the progress of COVID, it will take some time before immunity has been achieved on a global level. In the meantime, women will still be at the sharp end of the impacts on the tourism and hospitality industry. At the same time, rather than going back to the old normal, we could be at a crossroads where the direction we take could signal a transformative shift in favor of gender equality. Human rights policies, for women in tourism are an integral part of responsible and sustainable tourism policies. They're linked to the achievement of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Moreover, there is a clear business case across different sectors of the industry for diversity and gender equality. Business benefits of equitable gender strategies, or so-called gender mainstreaming, include increased productivity through talent enhancement and retention, increased customer and employee satisfaction, smart management of risks, and greater market knowledge and reputation, resulting in improved financial performance and shareholder value, as well as rising investor confidence. So what does the tourism industry need to do to achieve gender equality and fulfill its human rights obligations? Well, let's look at governments firstly. Policies are needed to endow women with required skills, close gender gaps in leadership positions, bridge the digital gender divide, particularly as ongoing digital transformation could actually greater flexibility in work, benefiting women. They need to ease transitions for older and low-skilled female workers. It's absolutely crucial that governments include women from all backgrounds in key decision-making fora and ensure diversity. They need to support women's organizations with funding, specifically to support women in the informal tourism sector. Support not just entrepreneurship, but also cooperatives and social enterprises. Collective organizations can be far more resilient because women can help each other. They need to provide cash and financial incentives for loan and debt holidays, training, technology, business and financial support. They need to provide social support packages for care responsibilities. And for informal sector employees, who constitute the vast majority of the female labor force in developing economies, special efforts need to be made to deliver compensatory payments, identifying those informal sector workers, but that will be a challenge. And it will need to take account of a country's particular circumstances. However, it's worth the effort to ensure more equity in outcomes. And there is a need for disaggregated data. To support effective decision-making to increase economic opportunities for women, it's critical that governments collect and share data. Important indicators include women's opportunities for employment, entrepreneurship, access to credit, and informality, as well as COVID-related data on jobs lost by sector, women's dropout rate from the labour market, and the incidence of domestic violence. And what does this mean for businesses? Businesses need to take this opportunity to actively engage with transformative tourism, which places gender equality and diversity at its heart. Businesses need an organizational gender equality review to create a policy and strategic commitment at executive level, supported by necessary funds and human resources, to engage all staff in an organizational review on structures and systems which promote gender equality, including areas such as working and pay conditions, closing the gender pay gap, recruitment and selection, ongoing training, including unconscious bias training and training on cultural diversity, career progression and promotion procedures, particularly encouraging women into senior and executive positions. Women should be encouraged to take part in training and upskilling programs to enhance their opportunities for career progression, particularly in areas of leadership as tourism managers or guides. In technology and where businesses are intending to use artificial intelligence to innovate strategic and operational procedures. Mentoring and leadership apprentice schemes, support with carer responsibilities, complaints procedures for sexual harassment or abuse, and also using technology to create a website or an app as a safe place for women to encourage anonymous reporting and good practice case studies on sexual harassment or abuse. Businesses need to aim for parity, 50-50 parity, or set annual targets with the aim of parity within a certain timeline. Recruitment of women into positions where they are underrepresented, such as marketing, should be a priority. Marketing strategies should be based on ethical principles, avoiding tokenistic and exploitative methods, and reflecting the diversity and culture of the destination and its tourism markets. Again, businesses need to engage with research to collect disaggregated data, particularly in tourism and hospitality, across different dimensions, such as inequality, gender, race, disability, and sexual orientation. And it's important that all of this is reported transparently. Monitor and measuring progress and results on an ongoing basis and transparently reporting them in annual reports is crucial. This sends out a signal to the public that the company is seriously committed to action rather than just rhetoric, and actions speak louder than words. It will also have a positive effect on its reputation, which helps to attract a fresh influx of rich new talent with the skills to transform the company. And this whole process needs to be transferred into supply chains and franchises as well. It needs to extend to franchises and particularly outsourced companies, where often any gender equality policies which have been developed at headquarters in companies will not translate into outsourcing companies or franchises. Business should also engage with human rights impact assessments to see how their activities are impacting human rights in their company, but also in destinations and the communities that they're dealing with. And women should either set up women-only tour operators and tours, or should be encouraged to do so by tour companies, and develop women-only travel products. And I just want to show now, to end up, I want to show how that can be translated into action. So for example, in India, you have a New Delhi-based company, which is called World Voyage, which organizes tours for women, and everything is organized for them: transport, accommodation, food, everything. Or you have the Three Sisters adventure trekking company in Nepal, which offers training and employment for women trekking and mountain guides. And one exemplary international tour operator is Intrepid. Intrepid, as I said before, has an exemptional gender equality policy where they have achieved parity in leadership positions. They have doubled their female guides and leaders globally, and they have initiated mentoring schemes and parental support programs as well. And there is an organization called the Roundtable of Human Rights in Tourism. It's a German-based organization, an NGO or a non-profit, which is very, very useful for you to have a look at, because they've developed very useful tools for implementation of human rights assessment. And they worked, for example, with Kuoni in 2013 and 14 on their human rights impact assessments in Kenya and in India. However, Konya has now changed its structure and it's been sold, and it's not very obvious publicly what their gender equality and human rights policies are like now. And this is what often happens when companies change structure or are merged. Things can change very rapidly. So there are many organizations, tools, and research materials that will help you to implement gender equality in tourism and hospitality. You can use external expertise such as Ananta Ethical Tourism Consultants, Equality in Tourism, or the Roundtable on Human Rights in Tourism to support you. And it can be done if there is the knowledge, will, and commitment. COVID-19 has shown us that in an emergency, things can get done very quickly. Well, we are in a gender equality emergency now. So I hope this has given you some ideas and inspiration to transform the tourism industry into a gender equal and sustainable industry. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Am I audible to you?
Yes, you are.
Right. So as we see that despite women accounting for more than 50% of the tourism and hospitality workforce, women are still facing issues of pay gaps, being objectified, underestimated when it comes to their talents, their efficiencies. And lastly, there is a serious dearth of representation of women when it comes to the decision-making panel of the tourism industry at large. This is a topic that we do not really address as a full-fledged paper in our curriculum, but it is nevertheless a very relevant and a burning issue that the aspirants of this industry must be aware of. So I thank you, ma'am, once again for your very insightful and engaging presentation. We have a few questions, but before that, ma'am, going back to the three case scenarios that you have shared with us, we have a few of our students who would like to share their inputs. So, ma'am, if you allow, then I can ask them to come on the screen and maybe share their inputs.
Yes, absolutely. I would be delighted to.
Right. So students, you can please come on the screen and share your inputs. We can start with our master's batch. Yeah. Yes, Prerana, you are audible to us.
Yes. Um, Good evening, ma'am. It's a pleasure to attend your lecture. And ma'am, the first case study which you gave, it was as far as I remember, it was a Ugandan tourism minister who actually displayed an advertisement which is highly objectionable for women because it said that sexy and curvy women women were portrayed as tourist attractions. So this is actually the dehumanization of like human beings into like objects. So actually this and this led to a widespread outrage, especially hashtag activism among the feminists and also the responsible citizens of the country. And Uganda, as we know, like it is a country which is notorious for like abuse of human rights. So on top of that, if women's rights are curtailed in this way, it will be a huge it will be highly detrimental for the development of the society. So these are my thoughts.
Yes.
And I yes. Okay.
Yes. Yes, do continue.
Okay. And ma'am, I just remember two similar ads. One is of a car company. It had the car in front and the woman by the side, scantily dressed woman actually, and she said, and like the tagline was "Drive her." So it's actually like people say that whom to drive, car or the woman.
Oh,
So
yes.
there is also, yeah. And ma'am, there was a company, airlines company, Kingfishers, whose CEO, like he's absconding from India, so that man said that we are not hiring air hostesses for our airlines, we are hiring flying models. So this also led to a huge objection among these women, and they had to change their tagline of hiring.
Yeah. So I think that what you're saying is absolutely important, and what also happened in some of these campaigns where women get together, and social media can be absolutely crucial in creating solidarity with other women globally now. And this is so much where, an important issue where social media can be so important. And sometimes what has happened in the past, I remember a scientist talking, diminishing women scientists, for example. He had to leave his job, and obviously one has to be very careful. We have cancel culture and so on in social media. We have to be very careful, but at the same time, the positive outcome can be a solidarity campaign, which means that policies can actually be changed. So that's very important. So thank you for your contribution. That's very, very helpful.
Thank you.
Okay. Do we have any other student who is willing to share his or her views? If yes, you can please come on the screen.
Good evening, ma'am.
Good
I
evening.
just wanted to talk about this. That traveling is basically freedom, and freedom has no gender. But we have we've grown a habit of victim blaming the women, and to suggest that women should not even be traveling with their female counterparts, it is very detrimental to the people who want to explore the world. And one more incident which I would like to share here is last year, two female backpackers were raped and murdered in Goa. And the first response was that why they did not have a man along with them, which gets us to the point that, sexist comments are there even in tragedy, which is a really sad part of it. Apart from that, victim blaming is a very major part which constitutes of blaming the journal. If a journalist covers a war front and something happens to her, there will be comments like, "Why did she even go to cover a war if she has children at home?" So we have this
Absolutely.
habit of victim blaming, which I don't think is a very healthy approach anyway.
No, you're
Now,
absolutely right. Yeah, that's a very big problem when in sexual harassment as well. Women are blamed for dressing in certain ways and behaving in certain ways. And as you say, that's a very, very big problem. And the issue is, how do we actually deal with that? Because it has to be discouraged in a company. It can be discouraged through policies and through leadership in that company, but in society at large, it needs to be addressed by media as well, and within communities. Communities need to address it as well. I have lost.
Yes. So do we have, ma'am, if you can just allow me to, call a few more
Yeah.
students, because
Yes. Oh, yes.
I'm receiving some
Very much
messages
so.
from them. Right.
Yeah.
So if you have anything else to share with ma'am, students, you can please come on the screen and share it.
Hello, ma'am.
Hello.
This is Shrestha.
Hello.
It was really inspiring to hear you talk about this entire issue. And I also think that it has been in light for a lot of years, since we are also getting to know about the industry more and more. So, as I read about the case study you shared for the Uganda Minister, I also think that it was a bit of perversion method to objectify women to promote their tourism and using women as a product to them. So uh, I don't we all like in the industry we see almost many ads coming, like Prerna also shared. We also see perfume ads coming more often, that uh, women are objectified and used as an attraction to pull towards men. I guess that's a bigger issue nowadays we live with.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you. And the problem is that, on the one hand, as the last case study, the quote mentions, on the one hand, women are put at the front of nations' campaigns and advertising campaigns, but at the same time, they're expected to behave in certain ways and look after children at home, and they're not paid equally. So there is a huge discrimination and gap in that sense. And we have to work hard to counter that. Thank you very much. That's absolutely right.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Can we have the next input, please, if anyone is there?
Yes, ma'am. I'm Swam from Bata 5th semester, and I would like to talk about the second scenario, which was given regarding equality shown by 15 women who went on a bike trip to Madhya Pradesh, and it also promoted the tourism campaign. Firstly, I feel that it's more than the completion of the journey. I guess it was more of a will of the women to complete that journey. And there were 15 women. 15 women won't be having the same personalities and the same characteristics, as like they won't be similar. They would be unique, but their objective was the aim was to complete the whole trip, which was their common objective. And the issue of the gender equality was like adding fuel to the fire. So it was more like they wanted to do all of this because it was their will, first of all, and second of all, this problem of gender equality, that men can do it but women can't. So they completed that to show that yes, we can also do it. It's a possibility, and since we can do it, so that's why solo women travelers can move more freely. They can move more freely, and they should be moving more freely and not be just contained in their houses.
Yeah, and I agree. And, you know, I think it's wonderful to see all those women bikers, because it's not something that you see a lot, or not all the time. There are very, very few women bikers as such. And particularly in India, it's just a wonderful thing to see, and all of them together as well. Now, I think that is something to continue, but to continue the discussion. To what extent can women, you know, travel on their own in India, or you know, with another woman or with other women? And so, in a sense, I think it's important to show that, but at the same time, it's also important to continue the discussion within the state, for example, or with the government in the state, and to then have an idea of how the situation is changing for women in the state, and how that translates. You know what? So it's not just an advertising campaign, but it's actually a part of a continuous program of gender equality within the state itself, and policies developed to help change attitudes and change culture and enable women to travel solo. So I'm not sure what was done in the state to make sure that women could feel safe when they were traveling. And it would have been, I mean, obviously there is much more to it than I will know, but it's always very helpful to know what the background and how is, and how that's been continued. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Do we have any other inputs? Because this is the last inputs that we will take, as we have to round up the session.
Ma'am, I have one opinion for the third question. Hello, good
Yes.
evening, ma'am. My
Yes.
name is Vishwadev Datta from BA semester 3. Ma'am, you have asked in the question number 3 that female objectification has made us very has thrown a very limelight in the public sphere, but only in ways that they do not change the patriarchal systems. Ma'am, in my opinion, I think that feminism and power are rivaled when it comes to any political issues. At the very top of the position, the people who are in the top of the position of the patriarchy, they just want to get the fruits without even trying to climb, left alone planting the seeds for the future generations, or the future of the country or the nation. Since the mentality is all about gaining and no struggling, they see the lower subordinates as objects and they keep them for the blue collar statistics. Okay, and now the thing is that these certain people are the ones who keep fueling the engine of the nation, but they are often unheard because of the lack of the proper media channel and various other aspects. And we, the citizens of the nation, only worship that leader because they are being more advertised than the person who are actually fueling and doing the actual work. So that is my opinion for question number 3.
Yes,
Thank you,
I think, thank you so much. That's absolutely right. Thank you for your contribution. That's lovely. It's very nice for me to hear your opinions and to have this discussion all the way in Kolkata.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much.
So, ma'am, since we are almost, we have run out of time, to be very honest, we will take one question from the audience because there are many questions, but we will select one. But before that, I would like to ask for the last time, do we have any other inputs from any of our students? If yes, you can please come on the screen and share it. Okay, so ma'am, if we move on to the question, what can we do as a tourist to actively support gender equality?
as a tourist, well, you see, I see gender equality within the framework of transformative tourism, sustainable, responsible tourism as a whole. So it's a crucial part of a bigger picture that we need to be aware of. So when we travel, we need to be sure that we want to travel in an ethical way. And that means, first, that means many things, which we haven't got time now to go into. But it means that we travel with, for example, responsible tour operators. We travel in a way which is responsible in terms of climate change. And in terms of gender equality, it may mean that we want to work with or travel with a women-only company in women-only groups. Now, that's not to say that we need to be separatist about it, but it can actually help to raise awareness, and it can produce a wonderful experience for women, as well as show society that women can do it by themselves as well. And it is necessary that if, for example, we go to hotels or we go into destinations to find out more about what the policies are that women are working with, and to make sure that we try and meet people and women in communities where we travel to find out about their situation and see how we can possibly help. So it's an ongoing process, a process of increasing consciousness and awareness, which can make a change. And particularly, I'm so encouraged to see the young people at your university to be so fully engaged with this topic. And I'm sure I have every hope that things can change. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you so much, ma'am. So with that, I would now request Professor Siddharth Nanda, sir, to kindly deliver the vote of thanks.
Thank you, ma'am. It was indeed an incredible session, and I really accept it to a certain extent, and I also accept that people like you are an exception to it, who has climbed up the ladder of success because of hard work. And to name a few, you have Indra Noor, who I personally admire a lot, being the head of PepsiCo, being a woman, and from being the India head to the world head. We have Neeta Ambani. We have so many examples as powerful women being heading in the corporate world.
Sure.
The times are changing very fast, and the view that you shared was incredibly, it is true and is changing also. And for students who are not aware, in India we have so many organizational bodies like Advertising Standards Council of India, Advertising Agencies Association of India, who curb the subliminal messages of these campaigns, wherein not only tourism industry but also all industries are affected. And so these are different organizations which curb it along with it. So thank you so much, ma'am, for your valuable views, and welcome. We hope that we have one more session with you in the future as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you
I
so
have
much.
thoroughly enjoyed the session. Thank you so much for inviting me.